from the time I can remember, I spent most of my free time working. I'm originally from Lincoln, Dawson County area, kind of that North Platte area. Grew up with a bunch of workaholics, so we did not get to do a whole lot of extracurricular activity. I remember in the summertime we did get to go to take swimming lessons for a couple weeks out of the summer, but for the most part, grew up in a tractor. My dad, my uncle, and my grandpa all farmed together and farmed quite a bit. Back in the 70s and 80s, Skyview Farms was one of the largest farming operations in Nebraska. I remember back then that one year that the property was worth $2,000 an acre, and the next year it was worth $1,000, and a lot of people lost their farms over that. The farm kind of fell apart for the most part, the big part of the farm, and so went back to smaller farming, and my dad started a trucking company. I went to college for a semester and realized that not knowing what I wanted to do, I was wasting time and money. And so I went the Navy route. I went to the military, and so I spent 13 years in the U.S. Submarine Force. Got to the point where I had some younger kids that were going to be, kind of did the math, and I was going to be on a sea rotation when they were all their 4 high school years. And so decided, hey, now's the time to get out. It was a good opportunity to move back to Nebraska and went to work for my family. My brother and I kind of took over the trucking company from my parents. And so when we moved back, we worked for my dad for a couple years with the idea that we were going to buy them out. And my brother and I did buy them out. We ran 49 states and most of Canada with grain hoppers. Really taught me a bit, like how to pay attention to profit and loss, what you're paying attention to, what your indicators are in business. It was a great job. It was great career for me while it lasted. Came down to the point where, like my brother and I at one point decided we wanted to be brothers and not business partners. And so we made that decision, and he bought my wife and I out, and we invested in properties, mostly commercial buildings. And so that's kind of how we got into real estate. I was selling a commercial property. Went to the local realtor, said, hey, I want to sell this. She quotes me a percentage, and can't remember if it was 6 or 7 or whatever it was at the time. And she says, sure, I'll do that. And so she went, we signed the papers, listed it for a year. One of my buddies calls me and says, hey, Koby, I got a friend that's interested in that building you have for sale. Where's that? Where can you find that online? And I was like, you know what? I don't even know. And so I called her up and I said, hey, I got somebody that's interested in that property. I said, what's the website they can go to find information about it? Well, she couldn't tell me a website. Got a little frustrated about it. And then the more I got to thinking about it, I was like, asked my wife, did she ever come take any pictures or get into this building? And Carrie's like, no, I can't remember if she did or not. So next thing I know, so then my wife looked at me one day and she's like, that's what you need to do. Got my broker's license, knew I was going to take a learning curve, so I partnered with RE/MAX. Started my own office, ended up with 3 locations and 9 agents when we sold, and it was a great deal. And so when we started it, it was like my goal was not to beat everybody. My goal was to impact the industry in my area to the point where we're raising everybody else up to a new level. I went from being not in real estate, very minute investor, to walking into the Nebraska Realtors Convention, and everybody knows who we are and what we're doing, and we're their choice for referrals for a lot of those guys out in the eastern part of the state, and got to be the point where we built a really good business and a solid reputation. When you're selling specialty properties like land, you kind of have to draw a 300-500 mile circle around your house and be willing to go where the properties sell. And so I started looking into it, and I got my Kansas and South Dakota. When I joined my company between RE/MAX and this company in High Point, they were growing, and so it was a benefit to them that I was able to go get those licenses. Like, my goal, honestly, is to go find some young entrepreneur, be a heckler for them, kind of motivate them, answer the phones, go put yard signs up, stuff like that for somebody that, that I can help benefit, help them grow their business. I would have appreciated, like my dad, I appreciated him putting his arm around my brother and I, teaching us how books work, teaching us what to look at and what to not look at, things to focus on, where there's a lot of noise in business, and you have to kind of hone down what's the most important part of this noise to listen to and what it's just that noise, right? And I think like with High Point, that's what my goal is with them, is how can we help, High Point expand into the areas that, the western part of in the states that I have licenses, I can be a benefit. My passion is to leave the industry in better shape than it was when I came. That's always been my goal. So what does that look like? It changes constantly, but absolutely, I have a heart for people that are coming up because I remember what it was like.